Good morning, you lovely people. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. I've pegged the washing out, and some might even call it warm, which is bizarre for February, but I'm really not complaining because it's lovely. And I'm feeling very inspired to start a new sewing project, which I've had planned for a little while. And it's slightly intimidating, but I feel like today is the day to give it a go. So we're going to make the next pattern out of the Sew 10 matching key styles for your wardrobe, which is a book of patterns by Anne Ringstrand. And I have had it in my head for a long time. I really hope you can't hear the washing machine behind me going off on one. I've had it in my head for a long time that I really want to make a suit. Now, I am not in a job where I have to wear a lot of suits, but I do think that it's an important thing to own and also important to have one that you really love and that fits well because you never know when the occasion is going to arise that you might need one. So that is our plan for today. I'm not brave enough to do it all in one session. So I will be making the trousers today and then the jacket at a later date when I feel more confident with the techniques that that requires because it is definitely technically more advanced than the trousers which I have planned. But I have some beautiful fabric, which is actually a dead stock suiting wool in a kind of sort of subtle pinstriped navy. It's really fab. And yeah, I'm excited to get started and hopefully make something that has beautiful construction and fits very well and will integrate into my current work wardrobe. The aim of the game for today, I have already pre-cut all of my pattern pieces and pressed them and then also interfaced the waistband pieces that needed interfacing. And this is the first time I've also experimented with seam tape, which I've never used before. But there are a couple of the pocket openings that have been reinforced with seam tape, which I'll show you in a sec. And I'm excited to see how that changes the sewing process. And I'm hoping that it gives it that extra bit of structure that's going to be really useful with a wool fabric. I'm hoping that these trousers will be relatively easy to construct. The pattern is listed as kind of beginner to intermediate because you'll see whenever I hold up the book in a moment, I just don't have a free hand right now. But they have a wrap front instead of a fly facing, and there are no complicated pocket techniques like welt pockets or whatever. So I'm hoping that it's going to be quite straightforward, and that means that my goal really is to just get the execution spot on. But I think they're going to be fun. It's a fun pattern, and they are slightly different to your usual suit trousers, which I like. So now I'm just going to go away and read the pattern carefully and see what our first step is. So the pattern that we're making today is the Archer trousers, which I think are an absolutely fabulous option for a suit trouser because they are somewhere in the realm of a pair of trousers and also a skirt. This is a slightly better image. It's a little bit less Zara model. So they're definitely a statement, but I think they are going to work well as the bottom half of my suit. This is the sketch for reference. I hope you can see there and it's not too bright. So they have a wrap front and extremely wide legs. When I was cutting the pattern pieces out, it was kind of like a vast expanse of fabric. But fortunately, there are pleats and darts at the back that will bring it in a little bit and make it a bit more manageable to work with. Let me show you the fabric that I have. So this here is the suiting fabric that we're working with. I don't know if you're really able to see on camera that there is a slight pinstripe in it that's kind of like a pale yellow color almost. And then it's just a navy wool blend. Because it's dead stock, I actually don't know what the exact composition is. I know that it has a high wool content because I did burn a bit. But from looking at the weft threads, I feel like there's definitely some cotton or linen in there. And the yellow pinstripes are very, very strong. So I'm kind of thinking that they're maybe viscose, but I don't think they're polyester. To be honest, I mean, I don't really mind what the composition is because it's a nice fabric. The feel is great. I've already washed it in the machine on a kind of hand wash setting, which I was a little bit nervous to do because when you don't know the composition, you don't really know how it's going to behave. But honestly, it barely shrunk at all. I mean, not by any noticeable degree. So that's reassuring because my pet peeve with suits is that I know you should be dry cleaning things. I'm never going to go to the dry cleaners. I will sit and hand wash something if it needs it, but I don't really own any clothes that I would ever take to the dry cleaners, so it's not practical for me to be dry cleaning suits, especially trousers and things that need washing more frequently. I'm happy to never wash jackets because jackets never need it apart from potentially spot cleaning. But it's nice to know that I can put this in the machine if I want to, every once in a while when it needs a proper wash. So I'm feeling like a bit of a hypocrite because I did say that it was going to be a simple pattern, but I've read the instructions about 4 times now and I am still quite confused. I think I think I just need to crack on with the sections that I'm confident with and maybe construct them out of order until it gets to the assembly stage, just so that I can actually get started on sewing. Um, it's mainly the only things that are confusing me are some of the diagrams are not very descriptive. I mean, to be honest, and it was my experience when I was making the Winterfell skirt, also from this book, the pattern instructions are very, very minimalist and don't really go into a lot of detail. So I would say that if you are a beginner sewist, it would definitely be more challenging to follow. I'm hoping that some of the more complicated instructions become clear when I start to put the pieces together. I think the thing that was bothering me the most was that obviously all of the trouser leg sections start by overlocking the crotch seam, and I wasn't planning on overlocking any seams in these trousers because I wanted the finishing on the inside to be really good. My plan for the whole project is actually to French seam any of the seams that it is feasible to French seam. But then I've also got some bias binding for the remainder, which I was planning on using on the crotch seam, but I might not get the chance to do that because it's hard to explain, but the way that the instructions are, I don't think it will work with bias binding. So I might just have to overlock them for now and then see if I can go back and finish the seams more elegantly when more of them have been constructed, if that makes sense. I'm actually not going to start at the very beginning, but somewhere in the middle, because I feel like I might as well get the construction of the belt loops and also the back pocket out of the way first. And then I'm going to go back to step 2, which is the back sections, because they're a lot simpler since they don't have the wrap fly situation at the front. And they just need darts and then the back pocket installing on one side. Now, she hasn't thought to mention which side of the legs the back pocket goes on because the pattern piece just says to cut 2 and the markings, it doesn't say to apply the markings for the back pocket to one or other of the back pieces, but there is only one back pocket. So, to be honest, I'm just going to put it on whichever side I've put the markings on because I definitely haven't bothered to do it on both. It will be what it will be, and I know that it really doesn't matter, or I think it doesn't matter. Maybe it will make more sense on one side whenever I sew the darts, because I know that the back pocket pattern piece is at a slight angle, so presumably it's going to fit more naturally on one of the faces of the back. I don't know. We'll work it out when we get there. So here I'm basically just finishing the pocket edges by double folding them and then sewing the darts into both of the back panels of the trousers. I have then also top stitched the back pocket onto the side, which I decided it was probably best at. But I mean, I don't really know whether it's right, but whatever it is, I'm happy with it. So we're leaving it be. It then also recommended to do a bar tack at the top of the pocket, which was a nice, really secure way of finishing it actually. And I think I'll do that in the future because I've never done that on a patch pocket before, but it worked well. I want to make a point about seam tape because I'm actually really enjoying using it with this fabric. This wool blend suiting fabric has a lot of stretch, actually more stretch than I thought it would. There's nothing, no elastane or any kind of artificial stretch fabrics in it, but I suppose just because it's a kind of looser weave, it definitely has more stretch on the bias than I thought it would. But the seam tape is really nice for keeping the top of the patch pocket very sturdy, and I think it'll mean that it wears well, even if I don't necessarily use the back pocket for storage very much. But I feel like since I've bought this roll now, I'm going to use it whenever I need to reinforce things like pocket openings or, I don't know, maybe fly facings on a zipper or whatever. If you've got any good suggestions for what you use seam tape for, then please let me know in the comments. Thank you. I'm confused. The dilemma that I have is that this back pocket is cut at an angle. So it is supposed to sit flat on the trousers as you're wearing them. But I've held this up against both pattern pieces and I cannot work out where it looks right. And I'm kind of wondering if it matters because it could just be that my pattern cutting is slightly off. And so then I should just put it where it works best with the pinstripe grain on the fabric, even if that's not necessarily the correct side. My inclination is to say that the straight edge should probably sit against the centre back seam because that is where the garment is symmetrical. But for some reason it looks better on the other side with the straight edge against the side seam. So that's the dilemma at the moment. No, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to put the back pocket where I think it is probably correct, where the straight edge is closest to the centre back seam. And then I'm going to see how it looks. Because to be honest, I can always unpick it and change it if it looks bad. And I can even do that after the garment has been finished. So it's really not the end of the world. Okay. Okay. I cannot make head nor tail of what I'm looking at here. That's the right leg as I'm wearing them. The crotch is in the middle. Why is this so big? I basted the pleats very securely within the seam allowance because I just could see those moving out of place. And to be honest, even with the pleats installed, I'm none the wiser really as to how it's supposed to be put together. I don't understand why this side is so much larger and why the... What is that? What is that triangle at the side of the right trouser leg? Because that is the crotch opening. And I have already seamed the bottom part of the crotch seam up to the notches, which I am used to doing with traditional zip fly trousers. I realise you can't see me. My camera is too, everything is in the way here. Just needs to be at an angle. Okay. So I think this side is wrapped, and now my mic cable is tangled. Oh my God. So I think the way that it works, I think, is that wait, have I got it the wrong way? Oh my God. Oh right, okay. Yes, sorry. So I had them the wrong way around anyway, but I don't think that makes anything any easier. Um, so I think this part folds back because there is a notch here somewhere in the middle. God, it's a good job I actually marked the notches on this project because that's not always guaranteed when I'm sewing. So I think this bit gets folded back, and then this forms the wrap front. That looks right, doesn't it? Yeah. And then as you're wearing them, this is the part which wraps over as closure. And obviously, there's a lot more fabric here because this part is actually double folded to form the wrap front. I still don't really understand why there is such a steep angle at the crotch opening here, but maybe it will all become clear whenever I construct the waistband and see how it fastens. Oh, I can't tell. Okay, I think it's going to be fine. I think it'll be okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the crotch opening, which requires me to fold this back a few times and top stitch it, I think, is the preferred finishing method. I have already constructed the rest of the crotch seam, as I described. And then I might have a look at the pockets, but I also might leave that till tomorrow. But if I do get a start on the pockets, I'm not going to finish them because they look quite complicated and I just want to get my head around them first. And after that, I'll probably pick it up tomorrow and see where we're at for fear of melting my wee head. Hello, people. We're back. It's day 2, and I feel like we're going to finish these this afternoon. Have a good feeling. I think I have got most of the complicated bits of the construction out of the way. When I left you yesterday, I managed to attach the pocket bags to the front trouser pieces and then just top stitch them as the instructions suggested. But what I'm going to do now is finish assembling the pocket bags. These are very clever because they're actually cut on the fold, so I only need to do a seam at the bottom. The top seam is encased in the waistband when it gets folded over. So that's nice and easy. And I'm thinking that I will use my bias binding. Where did I put that bias tape? There we go. I will use my bias binding to finish the bottom edge of the pocket bags because I think it will look really tidy inside and that will please me greatly. And also I feel like it's going to be tricky to use it elsewhere. I really, really want to work out a way to finish this crotch seam with bias binding. But I just don't know yet if that's going to be possible. I might work on it. I think it's just tricky because of the way that the crotch seam gets separated for the opening. And the opening is finished. I don't know if you can even see here. I can't see what you can see at the moment. But my trouser front opening is finished with a folded hem. That didn't sound right in my head, but we'll move. So yeah, I think it might just be logistically a bit difficult. But if I can get the crotch seam finished with bias binding instead of the zigzag stitch overlock type situation that I've got currently going on, then I think that that would be optimal. So I might work on that and get back to you. So here was the point where I actually decided that I did want to finish the crotch seam with bias binding, and I'm really glad I did because it looks fabulous and it's much better than just having a zigzag overlocking stitch since I don't have an overlocker. I have discovered a trick and I can't remember where I learnt this from. I want to say it was probably TikTok or Instagram or maybe YouTube, but using a zipper foot to sew bias binding whenever I have already closed the seam was actually a genius move because, and I think this is true for anything actually where you need to sew very close to a seam. And I can find sometimes whenever I'm putting seams through my machine with the normal presser foot, where it runs through quite unevenly, often it will push my sewing line off slightly. But using a zipper foot, you can get really, really close to the seam to sew whatever face you're hoping to sew on, but also keep the bulk of the seam out of the way. So for the bias binding, it was perfect because it just meant that I could sew the bias tape very, very close to the existing seam without having to unpick it and take it all apart. I think it was at this point that I also realised I made quite a substantial mistake whenever I was cutting out my pattern pieces. So because this fabric does not have an obvious right side and wrong side, I mistakenly cut both of my front leg pieces from the wrong side of the fabric. Or no, the incorrect side of the fabric. And it was only when I got to this part of the construction, looking at the diagram, that I realised that my front left piece and front right piece were actually the wrong way around. To be honest, I don't mind. I'm not mad about it because the trousers were designed to have a men's closure, which is left over right, and instead mine are just right over left, which is a classic ladies closure. So it didn't make any material difference to the construction or anything like that. But it's something that I need to be more careful of because that's a bit of a rookie error. The trouser legs are assembled, but I'm not going to show you the finishing on the inside right now because, quite frankly, these things are too huge to fit into frame. I feel like I could actually parachute off a building wearing these, but I'm trusting the process. They're definitely going to be a statement piece, but I think they will look cool. So my plan of attack for the final steps is to ignore the instructions entirely and blind hem the bottom because the pattern instructions just call for a normal top stitched hem. But I feel like on a suiting fabric like this, a blind hem would look really nice and smooth. And I have nothing against top stitching in the general way, but I'd like to give it a go because I don't often have an excuse to blind hem things. And for that, I get to use my very fun little blind hemming foot, which I have used before, but there's always a bit of, I don't know, risk with a blind hem. It can take a few attempts. I trust that I can troubleshoot any problems that might come up. And then I believe we're on to the last step, which is just the installation of the waistband and belt loops and buttons. And for that, to sort of set it up, I have just basted everything inside with a very obvious red thread. So that's basically all the pockets and the front part of the wrap section, which folds over to make sure that they don't move. And what I might also do is baste the belt loops to the waistband piece because I'm conscious that they do have a tendency to shift. So this here is really the last stage of the construction. The waistband was assembled in a very rudimentary way. I don't think I need to go into too much detail on that. I made the executive decision to interface both sides of the waistband because I wasn't convinced that the interfacing that I'd bought was quite heavy enough to do the job of reinforcing the suiting wool. And I'm glad I did. It held up really well, and to be honest, it hasn't made a difference to the construction at all. I did have to make some slight adjustments to the length of the wrap section just to make sure that the waistband fit the top edge of the trousers really snugly. But I didn't lose masses of length or anything that made any material difference to it. So I was glad that I had just basted the wrap section so that I could adjust it as I was kind of sewing along. And because I knew I was going to make some minor adjustments to the fit of the waistband, I actually sewed the waistband on the wrong way in that I attached the inside part first, just because that was the way that it would fit through my machine in the best direction to make some adjustments towards the end, if that makes sense. I don't think it does. Anyway, But that meant that, yeah, basically I just did it the opposite way from the instructions, but it looks the same, so it's all good. And in a moment, you're going to see the finished article. I'm really, really happy with how they turned out. I don't want to tell you how many times I rearranged the buttons because I was absolutely convinced that the buttons were in the wrong place. And it turns out that it was just because the fabric was moving quite a lot when I was wearing them. But it took me maybe 3 or 4 goes before I was happy with the button arrangement. So I will say that I didn't place the buttons on the pattern markings exactly. I just sort of did them where they fit and hung the best, which I think is a good method to use. I'm really excited to get out and wear these. The finishing on the inside, I will say, is immaculate. Obviously, nobody's going to see it, but it makes me really happy. And I'm keen to have a look in more detail at the pattern for blazer because now I've got these together, I'm kind of itching to make the final piece. And yeah, they're absolutely fabulous. They are ridiculously huge, but I feel like they're still professional, so I think they'll work appropriate. Congratulations, by the way, if you made it this far, because I feel like it was quite a chaotic sewing video. But please let me know in the comments how all of your projects are progressing. And if you've learned any new tricks or tips recently that you think I might enjoy, because to be honest, YouTube comments are where I find most of those useful things. And have a lovely week. I will see you very soon.